Edge of June. On the night after his ride to Lawrenceville a crowd sallied to New York in quest of adventure, and started back to Princeton about 12 o'clock in 2 machines. It had been a gay party, and different stages of sobriety were represented. Amory was in the car behind. They had taken the wrong road and lost the way, and so were hurrying to catch up. It was a clear night, and the exhilaration of the road went to Amory's head. He had the ghost of 2 stanzas of a poem forming in his mind. So the gray car crept nightward in the dark, and there was no life stirred as it went by. As the still ocean paths before the shark in starred and glittering waterways, beauty high. The moon-swathed trees divided, pair on pair, while flapping nightbirds cried across the air. A moment by an inn of lamps and shades, a yellow inn under a yellow moon, then silence where crescendo laughter fades. The car swung out again to the winds of June, mellowed the shadows where the distance grew, then crushed the yellow shadows into blue. They jolted to a stop, and Amory peered up, startled. A woman was standing beside the road, talking to Alec at the wheel. Afterward he remembered the harpy effect that her old kimono gave her, and the cracked hollowness of her voice as she spoke. "You Princeton boys?" "Yes." "Well, there's one of you killed here, and 2 others about dead." "My God!" "Look!" She pointed, and they gazed in horror. Under the full light of a roadside arc light lay a form, face downward in a widening circle of blood. They sprang from the car. Amory thought of the back of that head, that hair, and then they turned the form over. "It's Dick Humberg." "Oh, Christ! Feel his heart." Then the insistent voice of the old crone in a sort of croaking triumph. "He's quite dead, all right. The car turned over. 2 of the men that weren't hurt just carried the others in, but this one's no use." Amory rushed into the house, and the rest followed with a limp mass that they laid on the sofa in the shoddy little front parlour. Sloane, with his shoulder punctured, was on another lounge. He was half delirious, and kept calling something about a chemistry lecture at 8:10. "I don't know what happened," said Ferrenby in a strained voice. "Dick was driving, and he wouldn't give up the wheel. We told him he'd been drinking too much. Then there was this damned curve, and oh, my God!" He threw himself face downward on the floor and broke into dry sobs. The doctor had arrived, and Amory went over to the couch, where some one handed him a sheet to put over the body. With a sudden hardness he raised one of the hands and let it fall back inertly. The brow was cold, but the face not expressionless. He looked at the shoelaces. Dick had tied them that morning. He had tied them, and now he was this heavy white mass. All that remained of the charm and personality of the Dick Humbird he had known. Oh, it was all so horrible and unaristocratic and close to the earth. All tragedy has that strain of the grotesque and squalid. So useless, futile, the way animals die. Amory was reminded of a cat that had lain horribly mangled in some alley of his childhood. "Someone go to Princeton with Ferrenby." Amory stepped outside the door and shivered slightly at the late night wind, a wind that stirred a broken fender on the mass of bent metal to a plaintive, tinny sound. Crescendo. Next day, by a merciful chance, passed in a whirl. When Amory was by himself his thoughts zigzagged inevitably to the picture of that red mouth yawning incongruously in the white face, but with a determined effort he piled present excitement upon the memory of it and shut it coldly away from his mind. Isabel and her mother drove into town at 4, and they rode up smiling Prospect Avenue, through the gay crowd, to have tea at Cottage. The clubs had their annual dinners that night, so at 7 he loaned her to a freshman and arranged to meet her in the gymnasium at 11, when the upperclassmen were admitted to the freshman dance. She was all he had expected, and he was happy and eager to make that night the center of every dream. At 9 the upper classes stood in front of the clubs as the freshman torchlight parade rioted past, and Amory wondered if the dress-suited groups against the dark, stately backgrounds and under the flare of the torches made the night as brilliant to the staring, cheering freshmen as it had been to him the year before. The next day was another whirl. They lunched in a gay party of 6 in a private dining room at the club, while Isabel and Amory looked at each other tenderly over the fried chicken, and knew that their love was to be eternal. They danced away the prom until 5, and the stags cut in on Isabel with joyous abandon, which grew more and more enthusiastic as the hour grew late, and their wines, stored in overcoat pockets in the coat room, made old weariness wait until another day. The stag line is a most homogeneous mass of men. It fairly sways with a single soul. A dark-haired beauty dances by, and there is a half-gasping sound as the ripple surges forward, and someone sleeker than the rest darts out and cuts in. Then when the 6-foot girl, brought by Kay in your class and to whom he has been trying to introduce you all evening, gallops by, the line surges back and the groups face about and become intent on far corners of the hall, for Kay, anxious and perspiring, appears elbowing through the crowd in search of familiar faces. "I say, old man, I've got an awfully nice... Sorry, Kay, but I'm all set for this one. I've got to cut in on a fella." "Well, the next one?" "What, I swear I've got to go cut in. Look me up when she's got a dance free." It delighted Amory when Isabel suggested that they leave for a while and drive around in her car. For a delicious hour that passed too soon, they glided the silent roads about Princeton and talked from the surface of their hearts in shy excitement. Amory felt strangely ingenuous and made no attempt to kiss her. Next day they rode up through the Jersey country, had luncheon in New York, and in the afternoon went to see a problem play at which Isabel wept all through the second act, rather to Amory's embarrassment, though it filled him with tenderness to watch her. He was tempted to lean over and kiss away her tears, and she slipped her hand into his under cover of darkness to be pressed softly. Then at 6 they arrived at the Borges' summer place on Long Island, and Amory rushed upstairs to change into a dinner coat. As he put in his studs he realized that he was enjoying life as he would probably never enjoy it again. Everything was hallowed by the gaze of his own youth. He had arrived, abreast of the best in his generation at Princeton. He was in love, and his love was returned. Turning on all the lights, he looked at himself in the mirror, trying to find in his own face the qualities that made him see clearer than the great crowd of people, that made him decide firmly and able to influence and follow his own will. There was little in his life now that he would have changed. Oxford might have been a bigger field. Silently he admired himself. How conveniently well he looked, and how well a dinner coat became him. He stepped into the hall and then waited at the top of the stairs, for he heard footsteps coming. It was Isabel, and from the top of her shining hair to her little golden slippers she had never seemed so beautiful. "Isabel!" he cried, half involuntarily, and held out his arms. As in the story books, she ran into them, and on that half-minute, as their lips first touched, rested the high point of vanity, the crest of his young egotism. End of chapter.